the ability to learn from one's cultural heritage, personal experiences, and identity, to engage and learn from different points of view or perspectives of our own is critically important if we want to truly embrace diversity and diverse perspectives. Research also tells us that 15 to 20% of our population is neurodiverse, and that neurodivergent people have different ways of solving problems, coming up with innovative solutions, and using their own life experience to advance forward in today's multidimensional society at large, which indeed is extraordinarily helpful when you're looking to broaden your knowledge base and become solution oriented. For my friend Tara May, that's all in a day's work. She serves as the CEO of a nonprofit called Aspiritech, a nonprofit tech services company with 95% of their employees on the autism spectrum. She's a champion for neurodiversity in the workplace. She's an expert when it comes to cultural transformation and fostering innovation. Her philosophy is that companies can succeed and innovate by focusing on their ROI of kindness and embracing psychological safety in the workplace. Her message to managers and corporate executives is to elevate their culture by reconsidering outdated thinking and practices and embracing what a truly diverse workplace can be. May join me this week to tell me more. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Take a moment to welcome you to the program, and I'm super excited to learn what you do to help people with disabilities celebrate workplace diversity, my friend. Always great to see you, and thank you for a few minutes, my friend.
Absolutely. I'm thrilled to be here.
Absolutely. So, Tara, let's pick up with that conversation with July being Disability Pride Month. And what do you think is the significance of this month and the importance of why we should all celebrate it?
So I know there's always a little bit of a debate with months like this, right? June being Pride Month for the LGBTQIA plus community, March being Women's History Month, July being Disability Pride Month. And one of the things is, shouldn't we be thinking about this all year round? And the answer is absolutely yes. We should be thinking about it all year round. But I never turn down a party, and I never turn down a reason to celebrate disability inclusion, right? It's sort of like the new year. It's a great moment in time for everyone to stop and recognize how incredibly important it is to be aware and inclusive and accepting of disabilities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, Tara, that you're the CEO of Aspiritech, which is a nonprofit tech services company with a 95% autistic employee rate. So tell me about the company and why it's so innovative and about its mission as well.
Yes, absolutely. So Aspiritech is a really incredible organization. I am blessed to have taken over its leadership 2 years ago from the founders, Brenda and Moshe Weitzberg. Brenda and Moshe created Aspiritech when they saw their adult autistic son struggling with finding employment that was commensurate with his capabilities. He's so intelligent and so capable. And in doing some research, they found Specialisterna, a company in Denmark, and modeled Aspiritech after that organization. And it grew from their kitchen table to what it is today, which is a $6 million organization employing about 100 autistic adults, representing, like you said, about 95% of our total team. And we've grown from where it started in quality assurance to now include data services, automation, development, AI and large language model services, and just a host of tech services, all done by an autistic operations team that is absolutely incredible. We have clients all over the country.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know personally that you're, like I said at the beginning, a champion for workplace diversity and neurodiversity as well. And I know that cultural transformation and fostering innovation is close to your heart because you've got a philosophy that companies can succeed and innovate, if they focus on their ROI of kindness. So tell me all about it.
Absolutely. So thank you for thinking about that, Kevin. So I actually have spent my career helping organizations undergo digital transformation. So for many years, I worked helping newspapers and media organizations move from legacy print companies to digital companies. And what happens when you're undergoing a major transformation like that, particularly in the digital space, as fast as it moves, is you need a cultural shift. So that's what I excel at, right? Coming in and helping an organization find its way for an entire cultural transformation. And what I found is you don't do that by demanding it of people. You don't do that by saying, this is the way or it's the highway. You do it by teaching people why they need to change and understanding where their resistance for change might be coming from. You do it by establishing psychological safety where people can fail and try new things without being afraid of the repercussions. And so if you can build this culture of kindness, you can build transformation, innovation, and with that comes revenue and growth. So I truly believe that we need to put aside the old model of managers telling people what to do and embrace a new model of kind leaders who create a psychologically safe, kind cultural workplace that can innovate and grow together.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive into the whole idea of psychological safety in the workplace. People may be watching this and saying, I've heard that term before, but what does it really mean and how does it apply to my everyday when I go to work? How would you answer that question?
So the way I would answer that question is to talk about fear, because fear is the inverse of safety, right? You feel fear when you feel unsafe. So you really don't want to have a culture of fear in order to have a culture of safety. So what are people afraid of? Well, sometimes people are afraid to speak up and say when something's wrong. In a culture that's moving fast and innovating at the pace of digital, you cannot have a team that's afraid to speak up and say something is wrong. So how do you embrace that? Well, you're a leader who's humble enough to be able to hear when they're wrong or to hear when they can improve, when you can improve upon something. And if you can establish that, if you can set that example, that's going to be the culture you create for your entire workforce, where it's okay to say, I made a mistake, or it's okay to say, I have something to learn here. And I also think it's really, really important for your team members also to not be afraid to fail and to make that mistake. What happens when someone makes a mistake? Well, sometimes in cultures, people start to try to find blame. That's their first instinct. Let's point fingers. Let's figure out whose fault it is. I try to eliminate that. What I try to think about is, what can we learn from this? How can we do better? How can we prevent this mistake from happening again? It doesn't matter whose fault it is at the end of the day. That doesn't fix it or undo it. What matters is, how do we improve going forward? How do we pick up and try again? How are we not afraid to fail fast? I learned that from a great leader and CEO at Winsight. He encouraged us to fail fast. And that encouragement made us as a team willing to go out there and try new things and know that it was going to be okay if we screwed up along the way, because mistakes are going to happen. We're human. They're part of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tara, I'm fascinated to ask you about, why do you think hiring folks with disabilities can create a competitive advantage? As you know, Tara, I was born with a disability, so I was born with cerebral palsy, and I found out, Tara, at the age of 9 that I wouldn't be able to walk without assistance for the duration of my life. And when I graduated college, Tara, I graduated with a sports journalism degree. And when I graduated college and would go on job interviews, news directors would tell me that I had a lot of energy and enthusiasm and passion for journalism, but because of my disability, they viewed me as a liability in the field and they wouldn't hire me. And it took me 6 years and 4 years of volunteering without a paycheck before I got my first paying job. So tell me about the importance of really rethinking the way we implement our hiring practices and the competitive advantages that come with hiring folks with disabilities. Tell me more.
Yeah. So first of all, Kevin, I just want to note that it's so frustrating to hear your story, even secondhand, right? But it's not surprising because it's one I've heard in different varieties over and over again. People see the problems, they know the stigmas, and so they shy away from what they're afraid of. And to me, that's missing out on so many benefits. And I couldn't possibly name them all, but I'll talk about a couple. One is whenever I've met or worked with someone with a disability, because of their experience and because they've been marginalized at different points in their life and they understand that experience, they're always advocating and working for the most inclusive communities and workplaces possible. And I find that to be a huge benefit in the workplace. The other thing I've seen is the incredible amount of resourcefulness that comes from being a disabled person who's had to find workarounds for everything their entire life. I imagine this is true of you, that you've had to find a million workarounds, and that makes you incredibly resourceful.
Yeah.
I see it in my son. He was pre-verbal until he was about 6.5 or 7, but that doesn't mean he didn't find ways to communicate. He was one of the most resourceful communicators I've ever been around. And he would take my hand and show me what he needed or what he desired. Just because he didn't have the words to say it doesn't mean he couldn't find a way to show me. And that resourcefulness and that way of thinking outside the box is a huge advantage in the workplace. We're constantly trying to innovate and solve problems in new and thoughtful and strategic ways. And I find the disability community excels at that.
Yeah, absolutely. And tell me, Tara, how do you think neurodiversity can also act as a competitive advantage?
So similarly, neurodivergent minds are outside the box thinkers, right? And that way of problem solving finds its way into the workplace in so many meaningful and important ways. I'm always really careful, Kevin, not to stereotype, because even positive stereotypes are harmful. But what you'll find with autistic team members is that they have a wide range of strengths and a wide range of gaps, just like all of us as humans. However, neurodivergent people's strengths tend to be way up here, even if their gaps are a little bit lower. We call that a spiky cognitive profile, right? And those strengths, when they are applied with someone's talent and passion, can create a really meaningful, productive business relationship. And so what we really focus on as Aspiritech is pairing someone's strengths with a business need. And we find that magic happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tara, how do you think transforming a company or or an organizational culture can help in transforming the entire mental health outlook of the organization? What are your thoughts there?
That's such a great question. And one of the things I like to say is that the first thing we can do to improve mental health at an organization, at a workplace, in the world, is talk about mental health, right? For so long, there was so much stigma associated with it that we didn't discuss it. We didn't diagnose anxiety or depression. And now opening the door and talking about it, we can help people understand that this is incredibly treatable. We can help people understand that they're not alone in anxiety and depression. When I started perimenopause, I hit an anxiety and depression wall like a brick, and I had never experienced it before. Having someone to talk to, in my mom, who had gone through the same thing, meant that I knew what to do. I knew how to help myself. I knew how to get through it. And she helped me recognize what I was going through. If we can do that for each other in the workplace, if we can understand as leaders that our team are humans 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we can help people in a really meaningful way. So I think opening the door, talking about it, removing the stigma, and being willing to share our experiences is a really special path to making a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Tara, I'm also curious to ask you about how the disability service sector is transitioning to a more person-centered or individual service approach, allowing people to direct their own care. And how important is it, do you think, that organizations that are in a leadership role really embrace the change and try and make it a more person-centered approach when it comes to the workforce? What are your thoughts there?
I am a huge advocate of the individual person-centered approach to all kinds of care. We as humans ultimately should have the say over what happens to our minds, our bodies, and our lives. We as people, we deserve that, right? And we are all individuals with individual preferences, with different backgrounds and cultures and experiences that shape who we are. Identity is so complex and so multifaceted and nuanced. We are not one thing. We are many, many things that make us individuals. And that means our care should be individualized for us. And we are our own experts on ourselves. We need to lead the way in deciding what's right for us. And I think that's true when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to workplace supports, and when it comes to the disabled community, the neurodivergent community, all communities. We should have our own opinions about what happens to our lives respected.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Tara, I'm fascinated to get your definition to what it really means to have a really diverse workplace culture. Because, when I talk to businesses, they tell me, I really want to do this, but I don't know where to start. So if I gave you $1 million to create a commercial on workplace diversity and how it can be easily implemented. How do you think you would structure the commercial, and what tips and tricks would you put into it, my friend?
$1 million to create a commercial. That's an exciting proposal. So there are two philosophies I like to take with me when I approach diversity, and I will share both of those with you. One is I like to think of diversity in a really broad way and make sure I'm encompassing all the different kinds of diversity in the human experience. That can be racial or cultural diversity. It can be LGBTQIA plus identity diversity. It can be disability diversity. It can be socioeconomic diversity, gender diversity, right? You really want to make sure you're encompassing the full range of the human experience. So that's one thing I find incredibly important. The second is to expand that thought about diversity to include equity and inclusion, right? And there's a reason why we've evolved to that DE&I sort of statement. Diversity means talking about who's there, who's at the table. We also want to make sure everyone at the table is being treated equitably and that we are creating an inclusive environment, meaning everybody wants to stay at the table, right? And so thinking about going beyond hiring and onboarding practices into that workplace culture, deeply into it, everything from training to promotions to skill building, and thinking about all the ways you are supporting someone day in and day out, from the day they start at your organization to the day they leave, really is what inclusion is all about.
Yeah, and I know at Aspiritech, you focus on pairing the individual strengths with a business need and uplifting environments along the way. And I know you've touched on it briefly, but I'll give you the opportunity to expand if you had anything else you wanted to share.
Yeah, absolutely. I just will share how important neurodiversity advocacy is as part of the conversation, right? It's reflective of all the different kinds of brains and all the different kinds of thinkers in the world. And if we want successful workplaces, we need all kinds of humans and all kinds of thinkers. And what we've done at Aspiritech is create a workplace where autistic people and neurodivergent people can be successful at whatever it is they choose to do. And we would love to use what we've learned, our training and our advocacy, to help make all workplaces and all organizations more neurodivergent friendly, so we can open the door for all kinds of thinkers everywhere we go.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I also wanted to get your thoughts on this. The National Council on Disability and its people also said that despite the progress we've made in hiring folks with disabilities, more than 2/3 still live in poverty. So how do you think we can reverse that trend?
We have a lot of work to do. I know that statistic extends to the autism community. It's cited, 80% under and unemployment issues for autism. I think we've got a lot of work to do around removing stigmas, like you said, assumptions that people make before they even hire you. I think we have a lot of work to do around inclusive workplaces and what that looks like. And I also think we're going to need help at some level mandating it until those stigmas and inclusion are a part of everyday life.
Yeah, so building on that conversation, what do you think it means to think beyond the label when you look to hire folks who are neurodiverse or have a disability? So what does it mean to you to think beyond the label?
I think it means to see the person, right? I mean, there are so many labels each and every one of us could be assigned, but we're humans. That's it. At the end of the day, we are individual humans with lived experiences that shape who we are, different strengths, different weaknesses, different skill sets and talents and passions that we bring to the table. And that's what you have to look at whether you're hiring someone, dating someone, befriending someone, you look at the human.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I always tell, when I give speeches, Tara, I always tell business people, if you don't hire folks with disabilities, you're missing out on an opportunity to innovate your workplace and create a competitive advantage. And I wonder your thoughts on that sentiment as well.
I could not agree more. You're missing out on an incredibly talented part of the workforce. Why would you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. And, when I talk to people about hiring folks with disabilities, Tara, I used to be the regional ambassador for something called the Discoverability Network, which was the province of Ontario's first online job matching portal for folks with disabilities and employers to get connected. And when I talk to business people, the first thing they would tell me is, I wanted to do this, but how much money would it cost me? And I tell them that we did a study when I worked for the Ontario Chamber, and it found that 80% of accommodations for folks with disabilities are less than $500, and people would look at me and say, how can that be? Isn't that totally too expensive? And I always tell them, when you work with someone with a disability, it's like forming a relationship and asking the probing questions that would allow you to both have a successful partnership. So tell me about the importance of dialogue when you hire someone with a disability, and the importance of how easy accommodations truly are, because it's really not that hard, isn't it?
I completely agree with you, Kevin. And we often cite that same study, right? Accommodations are often very affordable and very simple to implement. And really, at the end of the day, what are accommodations? There are ways for us to support a human to be successful, to be their best self. Well, wouldn't we want to give that to every single one of our team members, right? If a disabled person needs an accommodation to be their best self, why would we not want to hand that to them? Why would we not want to open up the dialogue with every single one of our team members to understand what it is they need to be successful and set them up with that? I think as a leader, your most important job is to remove obstacles for your team members and set them up for success.
Yeah.
It's an easy way to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Tara, what do you think it means to embrace the full breadth of the human experience when you hire someone with a disability? Because everyone can learn something new, can't they? What do you think it means to embrace the full breadth of the human experience?
To me, that means respecting everyone exactly as they are, not asking them to change or hide different pieces of their identity. Saying, I see you just as you are. I respect and value you just as you are. And I know you have a lot to offer both to the workplace and the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we end our conversation today, I've got two more questions for you. And the first is, what do you think it means? I asked you earlier about creating a diverse workforce, but what do you think it means to create a progressive workforce where everyone's thoughts, feelings, and opinions are valued? And how do you think that can act as a positive for building an organizational culture?
I have never heard it put that way, Kevin, and I love that. I'm going to steal that from you. It's more than building a diverse workplace. It's building a progressive workplace, right? And I think that speaks to reflects on everything we've talked about in our conversation today, right? Going beyond hiring into inclusion, creating psychological safety, allowing a space where people can share their thoughts, their ideas, even their criticism sometimes. That's part of it too, right? And feel safe in doing so and in being who they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tara, my final question is more of a personal question, and it's the way that I end all of my podcasts, and that's by asking you about your personal and professional legacy, my friend, and how you want your legacy to be defined.
So this question is very important to me, Kevin. It's the reason I'm doing this work. I had a pretty bad health scare in 2020, to the point where I was creating a will and worrying that I wasn't going to make it. And I kept thinking, what will my children say in my eulogy? What would they say about what I did? And I wasn't happy with it. I didn't feel like at work I was using my talent and my intelligence and my motivation to do what I wanted to do. And now at Aspiritech, I am. And that is advocating for a world where all kinds of people are respected, especially in the workplace, and understanding that kindness can be a driving force in our world rather than exclusion. And I hope that's what they'll get to say about me many years from now.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, Tara, tell me if people want to get connected with Aspiritech or you personally, what's the best way they can do that?
Absolutely. So visit our website at www.aspiritech.org or LinkedIn me or email me. We're always happy to hear from potential partners and advocates in the neurodiversity space and disability space. It's something we love.
Well, absolutely, Tara. I have to tell you, I'm smarter for having this conversation. As I told you at the outset of our conversation, promoting workplace diversity is a personal passion project of mine, and I want to commend you for all the good work that you've done, both personally and at Aspiritech for advancing that cause forward. And I want to thank you for engaging in conversation with me this afternoon. It's most appreciated.
Kevin, the feeling is mutual. This was a great time. Thank you for having me.